Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today we are going back to Dogman basics. We're going back to Wexford County, Michigan, where, supposedly, the first Michigan Dogman sighting comes from. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fan fiction, scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may or may not like what you hear. Last but not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and now 3, the audiobook version, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those links are also in the description below. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? The Michigan Dogman. In Michigan folklore, the Dogman was allegedly witnessed in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan. The creature is described as a 7-foot-tall, blue-eyed or amber-eyed bipedal canine-like animal, with the torso of a man in a fearsome hollow. That sounds like a human scream. According to legend, the Michigan Dogman appears in a 10-year cycle that falls on the years ending in 7. Sightings have been reported in several locations throughout Michigan, primarily in the northwestern quadrant of the Lower Peninsula. Today's first encounter. I was in Wexford County between Cadillac and Manton, in the Long Lake State Forest with a few friends. We were back in the woods away by the creek, just talking and scouting for deer season. I was throwing stones into a cedar swamp on the other side of the stream when I heard a low growl. The next thing I saw was a shadow moving through the edge of the swamp. Not a clear visual, but I know it was standing upright and walking. Then rocks started flying back in our direction. We found it amusing, so we threw a few more back into the swamp. Then we heard the growl again and branches started breaking. We turned and ran as fast as we could back to the Jeep and got out of there. A little more info on this encounter. He stated that he was scouting for a good place to deer hunt with a couple of friends. It was a place where he had gone before and found plenty of signs of deer. They were standing on top of a ridge with a creek below and a cedar swamp below that. They heard a loud growl and were mystified as to what made it, as they had never heard a growl like that before. He picked up a few small rocks and threw them into the swamp toward the noise to see the reaction of whatever was down there. One of the witness's friends thought he could see something large and dark moving at the edge of the swamp. The witness thought he saw a dark, shadow-like, upright thing moving as well, but wasn't really sure. A few minutes later, some rocks were thrown toward them, one of which was quite large. Shortly thereafter, more growls were heard, as well as large sticks, branches being broken. At this point, the three were quite unnerved and left, even though they were all carrying sidearms. He stated that he has not been back there since, and he has experienced other strange incidences when at that location before that made him uncomfortable. The surrounding areas are part of the Pierre Marquette State Forest and abounds with wildlife. It has thick hardwood forests, swamps, many creeks, and small lakes throughout. It would provide ample food, water, and cover for such a cryptid. Today's second encounter. It was late midnight, and me and my friends were out shining for deer as we came across a field. With the light, we seen this thing crouched down in the middle of the field. but it was out from the road about 100 yards, and as we seen it, it stood up and started to run toward us. So I gunned the gas, and by the time I was at the end of the field, it was right next to the road. I was doing 30 miles an hour plus. A little more detail, he and his 3 friends were out riding in his truck shining for deer. They had traveled south on Summit City Road and continued south on North 31 Road, all the way to the river shining as they traveled. They hadn't seen any animals on their way to the river, so they turned around to come back up North 31 Road, continuing to shine for deer with their spotlight. As they came around a curve, they shined over the field that was about 300 yards wide and 100 yards deep. At first, they all saw were 2 amber-colored eyes. They were an amber color, but the eyes were not reflecting like a deer or any other animal they were familiar with. The witnesses couldn't explain the difference, but he stated that the eyes just looked different than any other animal that reflected light. Then the teens noticed that the eyes belonged to something large crouched in the field. They watched for about a minute until it stood up. At that point, the teens were so afraid, the witness, they jammed the gas pedal to the floor and got out of there. The animal ran toward the truck, diagonally across the field, and by the time the truck reached a residence, it was within 10 feet of the truck. The witness said that he had reached at least 30 miles an hour by the time it caught up with them. I have never seen anything run that fast in my life. That thing came running toward us faster than any man could run. The strides were 3 times the normal man's stride. At that point, it disappeared into the tree line. They then described it as having very long arms, and it was like his arms swung with mechanical control, as if the creature realized there was a specific way for his arms to swing to run that fast. The witness described hearing heavy breathing as the creature started running, and its footfalls like those of a pack of horses. All the noise from the gravel road and the speeding of the truck made too much noise to hear anything else. They did say that they felt the charge was a territorial statement rather than a direct threat. All the teens came away from the incident deeply frightened and wondering about really what was out in those woods. They then described the creature as at least 8 feet tall. The body was covered with matted, rusty brown hair. Shoulders were about 4 feet wide. The body of the creature was bulky and massive. He has never gone back to that area and will not go into the woods without carrying some type of protection. He also stated that he makes certain he's out of the woods before nightfall. The 3 friends that were with him do not talk about the incident, but they feel the same way about being into the woods. The one friend, who is female, will not go outside after dark unless she is with someone else. When the incident first occurred, they did share their story with some friends, and the friends divided them up into different rooms for questions. All their stories described the same scenario. Today's third encounter. Let me start out by saying I grew up in the woods of northern Michigan. I was 18 at the time. I've hunted, trapped, fished just about every critter in those woods since I was a small child, and I've never experienced anything like this that couldn't be attributed to anything conventional before or since. The night started out normal. My ex and I departed for a night of coon hunting. We released the old black and tan hound about a mile from where the encounter happened on a large creek bottom of Fletcher Creek. Just north of 8 Road, where the creek crosses the road, this was around 9 o'clock. The dog took off across the thick creek bottom, heading west, then north, crossing an open meadow and some pine trees before striking the coon's scent and quickly treeing a coon on the edge of the large swamp. In a big white pine. Everything was normal so far. We didn't have a gun with us that night, so we quickly loaded up the dog and took off to another. We released the dog again where the road, possibly 5 or 5.5 road, intersects an old beaver pond, where she promptly struck a scent and made a large arcing track north, then east, then southeast, covering a few miles of dense forest quickly. I soon realized the dog had struck a bear or a bobcat track, as she had chased and treed both in the area and never chased trash deer or coyote, and was covering ground quickly in a circle, so we decided to intercept the dog on the next trail. By the time around 10:30 we got ahead of the dog, she had treed whatever she was chasing about a mile south of the road. I don't know the name of it. There is a hunting pen and an oil well at the end of it, so we set off unarmed with 2 lights, nearly dead after about 1.5 miles. Whatever she was chasing took off again, this time easterly. Assuming it was a bobcat, I shut off the light and stood silent. A bobcat will jump a tree and run if it sees a light coming. The dog promptly treed or bayed the animal it was chasing again about 1 mile away. We headed the way using the light sparingly again. The animal ran. After repeating this another 2 or 3 times, we finally closed the gap to about 300 yards. Then suddenly the dog went silent and ran straight to us. Without calling, she wouldn't come if I called. I never could call her off a trail ever. Tail between her legs, whimpering. I thought this was odd because the dog had fought bear, coon, and bobcat and never backed down. Or lost. I don't think much of it. I was glad to have her back so we could just go. So I just leashed the dog and started back out. We were less than disoriented because the long, twisting turn chase and no moon. And to make matters worse, the lights died. We had no cell service. After about an hour of walking in what I thought was the right direction, I began to hear something big trailing slightly behind and to the left of me. I stopped and asked my friend if she had heard anything. She admitted she had, but didn't want to admit it for fear of me picking on her. We continued, so did the trailing. I kept throwing a dim dead light back in the direction of the animal each time the brush would crash and limbs high. I don't know how high, but higher than a deer could reach. And only a large bear on its hind legs could move or break, would react to something fleeing in the light before it would die out again. After a couple of seconds, the dog continued its unusual behavior, tail between her legs and skittish, especially when the animal began circling us. We would hear it then. It would be silent. A leaf would crunch ahead of us. I would shine the light in the direction. The sound of heavy pounding feet, and 3 big-inch around trees would break and shake. Then the light would go dead. The whole time I felt as if something large and intelligent was observing us, sizing us up. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and shivers ran down my spine. The whole incident lasted an hour or 2. We never saw the animal, but heard it circling us and breaking huge limbs 2 to 3 inches. Were being broken within 50 feet of us, and less, and we never saw the animal, just the vegetation around it being broken and moving. After it fled our light for a brief moment before the light would die, it was almost as if it were deliberately breaking trees to intimidate us, or that was what it felt like. I never looked for hair or tracks. There was a good foot of leaf cover, so tracks would be unlikely. I assumed it was a bear, but there was no woofing or jaw-popping, both of which I have heard before, and I don't believe the dog would have backed down after treeing and chasing a few already. I don't know what it was. The only other strange occurrences I had occurred within about 1 mile of another 3 weeks or so earlier, when a dog treed a younger bear. We left the tree to immediately hear a low cry, like that of a juvenile animal, a yahoo. At first, in the distance, then 50 yards away, we attributed it to a younger bear calling for its mother, and left reflecting on it later. It was unlikely any bear sound I had heard. Death cry, roar, growl, nothing. I don't know what it was. It was raining, so hard. Perhaps the sound was distorted. Today's final Wexford County encounter. A friend and I were bow hunting in October of 2000. We found an area we wanted to hunt the day before. We had hiked into the woods together. He chose a spot down by a creek overlooking a small swampy area. It was down a deep ravine. I continued on further down the path and found a spot and sat down in the tall grass. Neither one of us had a tree stand. I'd sat down for a couple of hours and was awaiting the time my friend and I call crunch time. That is the time when the wind usually calms down and the deer start to move. Off to my left, I could hear what sounded like an animal moving very quietly. I'd like to add that where I sat, there were a small hill between me and the spot where I had hoped to ambush the deer. This animal kept quietly rustling about, and I moved from a sitting position to a crouch, getting ready to take a shot. All of a sudden, a very large tree started to shake violently, and whatever this animal was let out this roar, scream that scared the hell out of me. I could see up into the tree and saw nothing in the tree. I couldn't see the bottom of the tree as it was obscured by the small hill. I immediately got up and ran all the way back to the truck. When I arrived at the truck, 2 DNR officers were waiting to probably check our licenses. One of the officers was male, the other a female. The officers questioned why I was running. I told them that what happened and also told them that my friend is still out in the woods. One of the officers unsnapped his holster, but didn't pull out his pistol. At this time it was dark. We walked into the woods looking for my friend. After a short walk, we could see his flashlight. The first words out of his mouth were, "Did you guys hear that scream?" I told him I did. He also elaborated that immediately after the scream, 2 deer ran through the swampy area at full speed. We all walked out of the woods together with the officers instructing us to leave. They didn't even bother checking our licenses. They were at a loss to explain what had happened. I have since bought a trailer down on the road in Manistee County, and am in that area quite a bit. And looking back, the thing that scares me the most is the fact that this powerful animal was very stealthful until it wanted me to know it was there. This area is known for the legendary creature, the Dogman. Well, there you have it, guys. 4 encounters from Wexford County, the very first sighting of the Michigan Dogman back in 1887. How cool is that? I just figured I'd share with you guys these pretty neat encounters. I love encounters like this, especially with a historical, timeline, I guess. I'm not really sure. It's 1887 to approximately now, a couple years ago. I mean, we're talking, wow, 100 and something years of Dogman running the Wexford County forests. Friggin' awesome, man. Awesome. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed these encounters as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. I've got a few more pretty cool encounters on the desk right here. We'll be doing those for you shortly. With that, guys, I want to bid you all farewell, and thanks for supporting the channel. See ya!